So imagine you've just, packed up your entire life into maybe 3 flimsy cardboard boxes. You've bought those incredibly expensive, ridiculously heavy textbooks, and you are stepping onto a college campus for the very first time.
Right. It's a huge moment.
It really is. You've got your class schedule, your dorm key, maybe a meal plan. But amidst all those lectures and final exams, who actually teaches you how to be an adult?
Well, that's kind of the ultimate paradox of higher education, isn't it? I mean, we hand young people a syllabus for, like, calculus or European history, but there's absolutely no syllabus for figuring out who you are.
Yeah, exactly. Or, how to manage a crisis, or just navigate the world entirely on your own.
And that psychological transition, what researchers actually call emerging adulthood, is just incredibly messy.
So true. And that's exactly what we're looking at today in this deep dive. We're getting into the hidden scaffolding of higher education.
Right. And the goal here isn't just to talk about, campus administration or something dry like that.
No, definitely not. We want to understand the professionals whose literal job is to keep students from falling apart during this volatile period. Because honestly, the way they do it reveals a whole lot about human development in general.
It really does. I mean, emerging adulthood is generally defined as that critical window between, say, ages 18 and 29.
Right.
And developmentally is this period of intense, sometimes really turbulent identity exploration.
Yeah.
It's not merely about acquiring a degree, you know.
Mhm.
It's about establishing an independent self.
Which is a massive task. But to understand the support systems that exist on campuses today to catch students when they stumble, we kind of have to look at how these systems evolved. They didn't just magically appear.
Oh, absolutely not. The history here is actually pretty surprising. Counseling on college campuses essentially started by default.
Wait, by default, no one planned it?
Basically, yeah.
Hmm.
Faculty members were just kind of stepping into the void. There was this historical policy driving this called in loco parentis, which basically translates to in the place of parents.
Oh, wow. Okay, so in the place of parents. That sounds intense.
It was. Under that model, a professor wasn't just there to grade your essays. They were, like, legally and socially expected to take charge of your moral character.
Wait, really? So they were acting as, the ultimate authority figures?
Exactly. They were enforcing strict rules about curfews, social conduct, personal behavior. I mean, they viewed themselves as substitute parents tasked with molding the moral fiber of young people.
That sounds completely unworkable for a modern university. I mean, it's hard to imagine tens of thousands of students accepting that level of moral policing today, like a strict babysitter policing your every move.
Yeah, and it eventually became totally impossible. A few things forced the system to just kind of break.
Yeah.
Like the 1862 Moral Land Grant Act created these massive state universities.
Making the student population just way too large for professors to parent?
Right, exactly. But the real earthquake, the thing that really changed it all, was World War II.
Oh, because of the GI Bill?
Yes, the GI Bill. Millions of veterans returned home and just flooded college campuses.
I mean, yeah, you definitely can't enforce a 9 p.m. dorm curfew on a combat veteran.
Precisely. I mean, these were not sheltered 18-year-olds. They were adults who had literally survived a global conflict.
Right. They've seen war. They don't need a professor telling them to go to bed.
Exactly. They didn't need a substitute parent. They needed real professional psychological help to process severe trauma and, transition back to civilian life.
Which makes total sense. So what happened?
Well, the Veterans Administration recognized this crisis and stepped in to help establish actual, clinically focused counseling centers on campuses. And that was the exact moment the profession shifted away from moral policing and toward legitimate psychological support.
Okay, so if they abandoned that strict parent model, what replaced it? Did universities just swing to the opposite extreme and leave students entirely to their own devices, treat them like consumers at a buffet or something?
Well, it kind of fractured into a few different approaches.
Yeah.
You do still see echoes of in loco parentis in certain strict faith-based institutions, but a massive shift occurred toward what's known as the student services model.
Which treats the student as a consumer.
Right. It's essentially a cafeteria-style approach.
So picking what you want from a buffet.
Exactly like a cafeteria. The university sets up a wide array of discrete services, a career center over here, a health clinic over there, financial aid down the hall. And it's entirely up to the student to walk down the line, recognize what they need, and put it on their tray.
Okay, but that assumes a lot of self-awareness from an 18-year-old. I mean, when I was 18, I barely knew what I wanted for lunch, let alone what psychological services I needed.
Which is exactly why a third model emerged. And this one is largely considered the gold standard today. It's this student development model.
Student development model, okay.
Yeah, and this approach is fundamentally proactive. Instead of waiting for a student to wander into a clinic in crisis, this model focuses on intentionally designing the campus environment.
Like from the ground up.
Yep, from dorm layouts to orientation programs, all meant to actively foster holistic human growth.
Holistic human growth sounds fantastic on a glossy admissions brochure, but how do they actually operationalize that? I mean, a counselor can't just guess what a developed human looks like, right?
Right, they don't just guess. There has to be some kind of blueprint they're working from.
So what's the blueprint?
Well, there are several, but one of the most foundational blueprints is Arthur Chickering's psychosocial theory. Chickering argued that college students don't just grow up randomly.
Okay, so there's a pattern to it.
Exactly. They work their way through very specific sequential developmental tasks, which he called the 7 vectors.
The 7 vectors. You know, I picture this almost like a video game skill tree. Like, you have to unlock your basic survival skills at level 1 before the game lets you access the complex, moral decision-making quests at level 50.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. Seriously. Let's actually walk through what that skill tree looks like for a typical student. The first 3 vectors are usually tackled early on, often freshman year.
Okay, so level 1.
Right. Vector 1 is establishing competence, intellectual, physical, and interpersonal. So just learning how to study at a college level, how to do your own laundry, how to share a tiny room with a total stranger.
Pure survival mode.
Exactly. And then comes Vector 2, managing emotions, the sheer anxiety of being away from home, the stress of midterms, navigating romantic rejections without a parent right there to comfort you.
Man, that brings back memories. It's a lot to handle all at once.
It really is. And then Vector 3 is moving through autonomy toward interdependence.
Yeah.
This is realizing, hey, I can make my own decisions, but also recognizing you still need other people.
So a freshman is entirely consumed with just keeping their head above water, emotionally and practically. By the time they're a junior or senior, they must be operating on a completely different vector, right?
Yeah, they've mastered the laundry and the class schedule, so the developmental tasks shift inward. Vector 4 is developing mature interpersonal relationships, learning to tolerate differences and form healthy, intimate bonds.
Which is hard enough even for adults.
Oh, for sure. Then Vector 5 is establishing identity, like the core sense of who I am. Vector 6 is developing purpose, shifting from what is my major to what is my vocation and my life's meaning.
Big existential questions.
Exactly. And the final vector is establishing integrity, creating a personal set of core values that guide your behavior, even when no one is watching.
I'm kind of stuck on this idea of sequential vectors, though. But isn't everyone completely different? Like, does an 18-year-old really follow a predictable mathematical formula for growing up? What happens to the non-traditional students?
That's a really good question.
Like, imagine a 35-year-old freshman returning to school after a military career. They already have autonomy and competence. Are they really starting back at level 1?
That is a crucial distinction. The theory is meant to describe the developmental arc of the traditional emerging adult. For a 35-year-old, they might already possess strong integrity and purpose.
Right. They've lived a whole life already.
Yeah. But they might actually need to revisit Vector 1, establishing competence, because the academic environment is completely foreign to them. They have to relearn how to be a student. So the vectors are a map, not a mandatory schedule.
Ah, okay. That makes a lot more sense. And, it's not just their personalities developing, their actual brains are changing how they process information.
Yes, cognitive development is huge here.
Right, there's this cognitive structural theory by William Perry that we looked at, which is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, Perry studied how students change the way they think about knowledge itself. And he found that students typically arrive at college in a stage he called dualism.
Meaning everything is strictly black and white. There's a right answer and a wrong answer and nothing in between.
Exactly. In a dualistic mindset, a student assumes the professor possesses the absolute truth, and the student's only job is to memorize that truth and just, write it down on the test.
Which is how a lot of high school works, honestly.
It is. But moving past that dualism to what Perry calls relativism, it's a massive shift.
It's like taking off a pair of black and white glasses. Suddenly you see colors, shadows, blending. It's a much more accurate view of reality.
It is, but it has to be completely overwhelming if you've never had to navigate a gray area before.
Oh, totally.
Because in relativism, the student starts to understand context and ambiguity. They realize that making a decision in the real world is almost never about finding the one perfect answer. It's about weighing evidence and making a judgment call.
Right. And understanding that internal cognitive shift is helpful, but it only looks at what's happening inside the student's head. If we want to prevent a student from falling apart, we have to look at the world around them, too.
Absolutely. The environment plays a massive role.
And there is a mathematical formula from the sources that captures this perfectly. It was developed by Kurt Lewin, and it is written out as B equals F, parenthesis P, comma E. Behavior is a function of the person and the environment.
That formula is the absolute cornerstone of modern student life services. Lewin recognized that you just cannot understand why someone is succeeding or failing by only analyzing their internal psychology.
You can't just look at their brain in a vacuum.
Right, you have to look at the context they are placed in. If the person and the environment are a good match, you get satisfaction and growth. But if they violently clash, you get crisis.
And this is exactly where theory meets reality, because those clean skill trees and mathematical formulas sound great on paper, but the day-to-day life of a campus counselor is incredibly messy. We see this clearly in the case of a counselor named Debra from our deep dive.
Oh yeah, Deborah directs services. She is a newly hired director of a campus counseling center, and she is immediately faced with a structural dilemma.
Right, she has to figure out what to even do with her limited budget and staff.
Exactly. What services should her center actually prioritize? Should they offer long-term psychotherapy for deep, complex trauma? Or should they focus on vocational guidance and career counseling?
Or maybe just offer short-term practical advice for academic stress.
It's a total triage situation. And on top of that, Deborah has to factor in a constantly changing student culture. Today's counselors are dealing with digital natives.
Right, millennials and Gen Z students whose primary mode of communication is mediated through screens.
And the severity of the psychological problems presenting at these centers is just staggering compared to previous decades.
Yeah, the statistics from the source material paint a very concerning picture. For example, college students are twice as likely to have clinical depression as people of the exact same age who are out in the workforce.
Which is a crazy statistic when you really think about it.
Wait, let's pause on that. Twice as likely. Why is that environment so uniquely toxic to mental health?
Well, it comes right back to Lewin's formula. The environment is a pressure cooker. Think about what actually happens when a student goes to college.
Everything changes.
Everything. They are suddenly stripped of their high school identity. Their entire family support system is suddenly hundreds of miles away. Their sleep schedule is usually destroyed.
That's for sure.
And the academic and financial pressure is exponential.
Huh.
On top of all that, late adolescence and early adulthood is biologically the exact window when many mood disorders first manifest.
Wow. So you have a vulnerable brain placed in a high-stress, low-support environment. It's a recipe for disaster.
It is. And up to 25% of students seeking help at these centers are diagnosed with depression. This reality forces counselors to pivot away from traditional, slow-paced talk therapy.
Because they just don't have the time, right?
Exactly. They simply don't have the time or resources for everyone to do weekly therapy for a year. Instead, they have to equip students with immediate mechanistic stress management tools.
Right, and one major technique mentioned uses the BRIMS acronym.
Yes, BRIMS. It's a really effective tool.
Let's break that down. BRIMS stands for breathing, relaxing, imagery, message, and signs.
Right. It's almost a form of cognitive self-hypnosis. And it works by actively interrupting the neurological loop of a panic attack or a depressive spiral.
So how does it actually work in practice?
Well, the breathing and relaxing components physically force the parasympathetic nervous system to stand down, which actively lowers the heart rate.
Okay, so calming the physical body first.
Yep. Then, by using imagery and specific positive messages, the student is actively overriding their brain's fight-or-flight response.
That's the mental shift.
Yeah.
And what about the S signs?
Right. Recognizing the physical signs of stress allows them to catch the cycle before it spirals out of control. So they aren't just calming down, they are deploying a psychological emergency brake.
That's incredibly powerful, but it also requires a lot of clinical skill to teach. And a counselor's job gets even harder because not every student sitting in their office is voluntarily seeking help.
No, not at all.
In fact, over 88% of counseling centers deal with mandated referrals.
This is a massive challenge for counselors. A mandated referral is a student who is literally forced to attend counseling by a campus judicial board or an administrator because they broke a serious rule.
Right. And there is a case study that illustrates this perfectly. Al and his alcohol. Al gets caught driving drunk on campus. He's mandated to see a counselor named Charlotte.
And he is not happy about it.
Not at all. He walks into her office, sits down, and his attitude is basically, can't a guy have a little fun without everyone getting upset with him?
Al's reaction is a textbook presentation of what psychologist James Prochaska calls the pre-contemplative stage of readiness.
The pre-contemplative stage, meaning he's not even contemplating that he has a problem.
Exactly. He has zero motivation to change because, in his mind, his behavior is totally normal. And to be fair to him statistically, he's surrounded by an environment that reinforces that belief.
The college party culture.
Yeah, 90% of students drink alcohol sometime during the academic year, and approximately 20% qualify as heavy drinkers.
Which is wild. And binge drinking, defined as 5 or more drinks in a row for men and 4 or more for women, is heavily normalized on college campuses.
Highly normalized.
So Charlotte, the counselor, has an almost impossible task. She has to act as a deeply empathetic therapist for depressed students 1 hour, and then the next hour she has to pivot and act almost like a parole officer for a resistant, mandated student like Al.
Just trying to gently lead him out of that pre-contemplative stage. It is a profound balancing act.
I can't even imagine the emotional whiplash.
And the complexity multiplies when we confront the major assumption we've been making this entire time. When we say the word college student, we almost automatically picture an 18-year-old freshman living in a dorm. Right.
Right. Maybe dealing with over-involved parents, joining clubs, going to football games, the classic Hollywood stereotype of university life.
But that attritional student is no longer the full picture. Not even close. If we look at the readjustment rating scale, which psychologists use to measure the impact of major life events entering college, scores a 43.
A 43. And to put that in perspective for you listening, anything over a 50 indicates a severe risk of a deteriorating health change. Researchers literally categorize entering college as a major life crisis.
Yes, a major life crisis. Now take that baseline level of crisis of 43 and apply it to non-traditional populations.
The students who don't fit the Hollywood mold.
Exactly. These are students who lack the built-in safety nets, the dorm communities, and the free time of a traditional 18-year-old. The real challenge for campus professionals today is ensuring these specific populations don't fall through the cracks.
For instance, almost 40% of students are part-time. That is a staggering portion of the population.
It's a huge number.
And they are highly concentrated in 2-year or community colleges. They are often commuting, and they usually lack any real physical or social connection to the campus itself. They show up, take their class, and leave.
Right. And you also have older, non-traditional students. These are individuals returning to school, often highly motivated by a major life transition like a divorce or a career change.
But their stress is completely different.
Exactly. Their stress comes from balancing intense academic loads with full-time jobs and raising children.
Then there are graduate students who exist in this bizarre limbo. They are highly stressed, incredibly isolated in their specific research silos, and overwhelmed by role conflicts, like, are they a student, a teacher, or a junior colleague?
It's very confusing for them. And student athletes experience their own unique isolation too. They exist in this sort of parallel universe on campus where their athletic identity completely overshadows their academic identity.
But the group that requires perhaps the most nuanced support are first-generation students.
Yes, these are students whose parents did not attend college.
And the most critical takeaway regarding this group is that the dividing line between them and their peers isn't intelligence or capability or ambition. The dividing line is family support.
That's the key. And family support isn't just about having someone cheer you on from the sidelines. It's about having a guide.
Right, someone who knows the terrain.
Exactly. First-generation students arrive on campus and are instantly confronted with a completely foreign language that their parents cannot help them translate.
They just don't know the unwritten rules. Things that seem totally obvious to a second-generation student, like what a credit hour means, how to interpret a syllabus, what office hours are actually for.
Or even what a dean does.
Yeah. These are completely alien concepts. Which brings us to a really powerful case study from the reading, Part-Time Patricia.
Patricia's story really highlights all of this.
It really does. Patricia is a brilliant first-generation Guatemalan student. Her parents spoke limited English and worked minimum wage jobs to support her. And because of her academic excellence, she earned a scholarship to a large, predominantly white university.
But by her sophomore year, the environment begins to crush her. She feels entirely isolated.
She has no one to talk to.
Right. She can't talk to her parents about her academic pressure because they simply don't have the context to understand it. And she feels a profound cultural disconnect from her affluent, predominantly white classmates.
So Patricia ends up in the counseling center, sitting across from a counselor named Libby. And what Libby does is incredibly insightful.
Yeah, she doesn't just default to therapy.
Right. Libby realizes that putting Patricia into weekly intensive psychotherapy isn't the solution. Patricia doesn't have a pathological mental disorder. Her distress is entirely situational.
And this is Lewin's formula in pure action. B equals F of P and E. Patricia, the person, is highly capable and motivated. The environment, an unnavigable, isolating, culturally disconnected campus, is the actual pathology here.
The environment is what's making her sick.
Exactly. It's causing the negative behavior and the distress. So Libby doesn't try to fix Patricia. She tries to fix the environment.
Which is brilliant. Libby personally refers Patricia to the Dean of Student Services with the explicit goal of getting her integrated into a campus community group.
It sounds so simple, like, oh, just go join a club, but it completely changes the equation.
It does. By altering Patricia's environment, by connecting her with a community that actually understands her experience, the distress just evaporates.
It really proves that college counseling isn't always about deep psychological excavation. Sometimes it's about being an expert architect of a student's environment.
Yeah, that's such a great way to put it. When we pull all these threads together, a totally different picture of higher education emerges. A college isn't just an academic factory dispensing degrees.
And not at all. It is a massive, intricate psychological ecosystem.
It is actively engineered to take adolescents, as well as returning adults, and forge them into autonomous, capable humans.
And the counselors, the student life directors, the advisors, these are the hidden mechanics operating the machinery of emerging adulthood. They're designing the proactive environments, they're teaching the cognitive tools like BRIMS, and they're translating the hidden language of academia for those who have no guides.
And even if you listening are far removed from your college years, or if you never stepped foot on a campus, the underlying mechanisms we've explored today apply directly to you.
Absolutely. We are all constantly navigating our own ongoing versions of emerging adulthood.
Right. Whether you are moving to a new city, stepping into a new management role, or just navigating a major life transition, you are actively moving through those developmental vectors. You are having to reestablish competence and manage new emotions all the time.
And crucially, you are always subject to Lewin's formula. Your behavior, your stress levels, and your success are always going to be a function of who you are interacting with, the environment you are in.
Always. Which leaves us with a critical question to consider today. If our environments dictate our behavior and development so powerfully, what campus are you currently living on?
That's a great question to ask yourself.
Take a hard look at your daily environment, your workplace culture, the layout of your home, your social circles. Is that environment actively developing you? Is it pushing you to grow and establish integrity?
Or is it an environment that actively clashes with who you are, creating a constant low-level crisis?
Exactly. You don't have to wait for someone else to intervene.
Yeah.
How might you step up right now and become the director of student life for your own environment? Keep that B equals F of P and E formula in mind today.